Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Really excited. So many people who have come to see us tonight. Thank you for making the time. This is a very special evening for us. I mean, as you've seen, we have two exhibitions on display right now. We have upstairs the latest experimentation by BottoDAO, which is an experimentation with P5JS. And we have some earlier works by BottoDAO on display as well. And in the gallery in the back, we have some works by Roperanisto, who is an artist who also works with artificial intelligence, and his work is very much about the dystopian, utopian lives and human psychology. If you have the time, make sure that you have a look at both exhibitions before you go home. But yeah, we've brought two artists together, well, BottoDAO being an autonomous, decentralized artist, and Rope, two artists together that we felt like are really influential and really have something very interesting to say in the space of artificial intelligence within visual arts. And all these working adverse with these incredible artists really brought so many questions to the table. What does it really mean, to work with AI these days as an artist? And what's the history of it? So I'm really, really delighted that we have two incredible panels of experts who are bringing their experience of, one, the history of AI, but also curating and working with artists who work with artificial intelligence. Both of these panels, so they're two separate panels. The first one is, I'm very, very excited. I have a moderator who is Katherine Mitchell, who is the doctoral researcher at the Victoria Albert Museum. And Katherine's research is concerned with Born Digital Collection, but specifically the museum's first software-based artworks acquired around 2011, which she used to examine digital objects' changing condition states in museum collections over time. Katherine will be introducing her panel very shortly. And our second panel is moderated by Louis Jebb. And Louis is the managing editor of the Arts newspaper. He's a writer and editor and producer of content in virtual reality. He set up and edits the art newspaper XR panel, which reviews art world ventures in augmented and virtual reality. In 2014, he founded Immersively, a maker of news content in virtual reality. Louis serves as a jury member for many awards, and we are just really delighted to have such fantastic moderators and speakers. I really look forward to hearing all about it myself. So I'm going to hand it over here to Katherine, and yeah, thank you so much again.
So how do we do this? No, I don't yet. It's not mine, it's Simon's. It's Simon's. Okay.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming out, as Layla says. Thanks for spending your Thursday with us. I just wanted a quick thanks to Layla and the Versworks team for having me, and for the speakers for sharing your really great insights with us. I am going to introduce the first panel, which is the past, present and future of AI art. And we have three speakers with us: Arthur Miller, Luba Elliott and Simon Hudson. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce all of them now, and then they're each going to speak a little bit in turn, and then we will come back together for a group discussion, give them some time and space to respond to each other, but also some questions that I have, and then we're going to open it up to questions from you all. So please do think of questions whilst they're speaking, hold those till the end, because it'll be really fantastic to hear from you. So, first up, we have Dr. Arthur I. Miller, who will be talking about the longer history of AI art. Arthur is a scientist, speaker, and the author of Colliding Worlds: How Cutting-Edge Science is Redefining Contemporary Art, and The Artist in the Machine. Arthur has lectured and written on the history and philosophy of 19th and 20th century science and technology, cognitive science, scientific creativity, and the relationship between art and science. He was Professor of History and Philosophy of Science at University College London, where he founded the Department of Science and Technology Studies. After that, we'll hear from Luba Elliott. So Luba is a curator and researcher specialising in AI art. She works to educate and engage the broader public about the developments in AI art through talks and exhibitions, at venues across the art, business and technology spectrum, including the Serpentine Galleries, Arabyte, ZKM, the V&A Museum, Feral File, CVPR and Neural PS. She is an honorary senior research fellow at the UCL Centre for Artificial Intelligence. And then last but not least, we have Simon Hudson. So Simon is co-lead of the BottoDAO project. Simon leads conceptual development and partnership across technology, art and academia. Simon has a background in science communications for AI, and before BottoDAO, he spent 4 years at AI research lab Element AI, working in strategic programs in responsible AI development, AI literacy and AI policy. And as we'll hear shortly, BottoDAO is a first of its kind machine artist that has automated the creative process based on feedback from online participants in order to understand context, culture, and ultimately what is art, all while maintaining its artistic agency and authorship. So Arthur, please take it away.
First of all, thank you, Layla, for inviting me to speak at this timely and prestigious gathering. Now, AI art, a subject with an inspiring past, an exciting present, and a breathtaking future. That's the gist of what I'll be talking about. And let's begin sort of at the beginning. During World War II, big-as-a-room computers were instrumental in cracking enemy codes, such as this machine called Colossus, sited at Bletchley Park. Then in the 1960s, you had big-as-a-room computers, such as the IBM 7090, which were used to solve numerically complicated mathematical equations, and the solution was mapped out with a graphical unit, a plotter attached to the machine, in other words, line drawings. Now, any inkling that machines could be more than mere number crunches was discussed in the 1960s by such visionaries as A. Michael Knoll, who worked at Bell Labs in the US. Knoll, incidentally, is the person who coined the term computer art. As an interesting experiment, Knoll set up a situation where he compared a work of art created by a machine, and he compared a work of art created by a machine with a work of art created by a master. And what he did was he took randomly spaced points and wrote a computer program to connect those points with lines horizontal and vertical. And the result was computer composition with lines. And then he compared that with Mondrian's composition with lines. And to his surprise, most people preferred the computer composition with lines because it looked more random. Just shrugged his shoulders and said, well, so much for creativity by jury. Then he connected 99 points with 100 lines. And he did that. He took the points, he calculated the points, XY coordinates, with points randomly selected from a bell-shaped curve, and treated those points with a quadratic equation and called the creation Gaussian quadratic. And tongue-in-cheek, he compared it to Picasso's Ma Jolie, looking at the line structure. At about the same time, Frieda Nack in Germany did similar experiments. And he worked on, his first experiment was with Paul Klee's Highways and Byways on the left from 1929. And what Nack did was to write a computer program with an amount of randomness in it for variety, and calculated Klee's straight lines as curved lines and roughly drawn circles as perfect circles. And Naka's creation on the right, he called homage to Paul Klee. Again, in this era, Vera Molnar in Paris experimented with composing patterns with straight lines using a computer. And she was harshly criticized by the Parisian art establishment as working outside of the line of the history of art, to which she replied, well, nothing doing. What I'm up to is I'm extending work done by modernist artists such as, well, guess who? Mondrian. And this is our 1974 homage to Mondrian. So, thus did Klee and Mondrian become catalysts for a new trend in art owing to their styles using lines which plotters could emulate. Knoll, Naka, and Molnar guessed that Klee and Mondrian unknowingly followed rules and algorithms. In other words, they were closet algorithmic artists. Harold Cohn's Artbot Aaron was more sophisticated than the previous ones. It was essentially a series of computer programs that Cohn formulated over the years 1968 to 2016 when he died. They were rule-based algorithms with, again, an element of randomness in it. So when he assembled eyes, noses, legs, arms, rivers, flowers, and whatnot, there would be randomness in there. And they produced pleasing pictures such as this one, which it is said Aaron made in his own style, which was essentially the style of Harold Cohen. Now what computer scientists really wanted to do was to let computers loose to create. And a means for this was had with artificial neural networks coming of age in the 21st century. An artificial neural network is comprised of layers of artificial neurons, and the overall structure is that of the human brain. With artificial neural networks came machine learning, where without any rules, a machine could learn directly from data. And so discussions of machine creativity reached a much higher plane than being merely academic. Machines play a central role in our life. The horse is out of the stable, AI is here to stay. But there are problems, and one of the problems is that we really don't know how artificial neural networks work, yet they're used in driving driverless cars and so on. And art has given us some hints in this direction. And what I mean is the creation, I should say, in 2015 of the algorithm Deep Dream by Alexander Mordvintsev, standing on my left. Deep Dream is an algorithm that can tell you what a machine sees in each layer of neurons. For example, if you study a street photograph, and put it to an artificial neural network and stop the processing at some layer inside the machine, then the machine will see something like that. I mean, that's just amazing. That's surrealistic. It's not what we had expected. And a whole new artwork popped up, Deep Dream artwork, and that style took the world by storm. And a new type of artist began to emerge. Well, actually it began to emerge in the 1990s as well, called the AI artist. The AI artist produces with code, works with code and machines. The AI artist is artist and technologist rolled into one. Mordvintsev became an AI artist, and another example of an AI artist is Mario Klingemann, who said to me, human creativity is limited. The implication being that machine creativity is unlimited, to which I wholeheartedly agreed. Now Mario has made vital contributions to just about every part of AI art, and particularly to the art that will be discussed later tonight, and the art of BottoDAO. What I'm going to talk about is Mario's contribution to GAN art, generative adversarial network art. Now, a generative adversarial network is made up of two networks. One is a generator network that generates images from nothing, from noise, and then passes them up to a discriminator network, which tests whether they are real or not relative to what's in its database. If they're not real, bang, right back to the generator network. And this adversarial relationship goes on and on until the generator network gets the idea of what the discriminator network wants. But by that time, the memory of the generator network has been made up of images that have very little to do with the world in which we live. Now, the particular GAN project I want to just mention here that Mario worked on is one for which he chose an atypical data set, because to Mario, the choice of the data set is also a creative act. And he chose thousands of pairs of images, one part of which is a high-resolution photograph, and the other one is a blurred version of that photograph. He trained his machine with that, and then fed the machine a blurred image to get the process going, and let the machine, as he said, straighten it out. And this is what the machine straightened it out as. Very Francis Bacon-esque in aesthetic. They're surprising, novel, and complex, which are indicators, by consensus, are indicators of human creativity, so why not machine creativity too? So we may say that the algorithms Deep Dream and generative adversarial networks allow machines to begin to dream, to imagine, and to form an inner life of their own. Now I want to get to the most exciting part of AI today, generative AI. where generative AI technologies can create text, audio, and images in response to prompts. I'm going to talk about machines as artists, of course. And the algorithms for generative AI artwork work on a complex process which creates images that are very different from the images the machine was trained on. This gives these machines a distinct advantage over previous art bots, such as Aaron, for example. Popular art bots, which you probably use, are Stable Diffusion, DALL-E 2, and Midjourney. They're all of the same ilk, but they differ in character and style, just like we do. And let's look at how these three algorithms respond to the prompt, pyramid-shaped mountain above a still lake covered with snow. Stable Diffusion gives a very nice artistic image. DALL-E 2, a very sharp photographic image. And Midjourney begins to take artistic license. Now we can ask whether you can patent AI art. In the States, in the United States, the US Patent Office says bluntly no. Only humans can be creative, not machines. Well, on that note, let's play a little game, which you can all participate in. I'm going to show you two images. And can you tell me whether they were created by a human or by a machine? What about this one? How many votes for human? Oh, take a chance. Machines, the rest, right? Yes? Well, it was done by a human. It was done, the artist is Ansanto Finchtar. And what about this one, which is quite beautiful? Was that done by a human? AI. Oh, AI, but you all read the New York Times, okay. Yes, it was done by a human. It was done by a machine. It was done by the algorithm Midjourney running on an artificial neural network. So actually, it's not straightforward to tell art done from an AI apart from art done by a human. It's sort of a primitive Turing test. The hand behind this piece of work is that of Jason M. Allen, and he called it Space Opera Theater, and it won an award, a prestigious award. It was highly publicized, and he was attacked immediately by artists as committing high-tech piracy in not compensating them or acknowledging their work, which was used to train the artificial neural network on which Midjourney ran. And that opened up the Byzantine area of AI copyright. Now, the New York Times picked up the story and quoted J.M. Allen, AI artist, thus, art is dead, dude. It's over. AI won, humans lost. To which AI Miller, namely me, wrote on Twitter, not so fast, dude. There's art produced by humans, collaborations between the machine and human, and art created by machines. From end to end, different aesthetics, different art, no one loses. Well, perhaps not for now. Okay, so why has there not yet, we may ask, why has there not yet emerged a masterpiece of AI art? And my feeling is that we will have to learn to appreciate art we know has been produced by a machine. So what do art bots tell us about creativity? Well, that machines can imagine and see what we cannot imagine and see. And that creativity not need be the purview of organic systems like us, but also of silicon-based systems, seemingly dumb artificial neural networks. Now, as one critic of AI art likes to put it, open up the hood of a machine, what do you see? A mass of wires and transistors. How could something like that be creative? But open up our hood, take off our skull. What do we see? A disgusting gelatinous mass of veins and nerves. How could something like that be creative? To me, the boundary between human intelligence and machine intelligence will blur, and there will be only intelligence. Now, I added on to that sentence in the fantastical style of surrealism and gave it as a prompt to the algorithm Coherent. And it produced a number, huge number of pictures, and as big as you want. I chose this one because a lot occurred like that. I mean, that just blew my mind. This is how the machine saw that prompt. And to me, it seems as if in the future, machines may well have to explain their art to us humans, whatever human will mean by that time. And we should not characterize AI art like the previous art, because AI art is the world as seen through the eyes of a machine. So I gave DALL-E 2 the prompt Infinite Joy, and it gave me a number of images. But a lot of them were like that. I mean, this impish creature having the time of his life, it has to touch you. And the conclusion you must draw from that is that for an artificial system to understand these difficult concepts, infinite joy, and manipulate them makes it seem as if there is something going on in the machine beyond probabilities and numbers. I mean, if you give a computational model of the brain, there has to be more in that model than probabilities and numbers, something that can give rise to such emerging qualities as creativity and maybe consciousness. So to conclude, into the future, the way I see it is right now, because it's difficult today to predict more than 5 years into the future. I mean, I used to say, who knew 20 years ago the world would be like it is today? And now it's who knew 3 years ago. Remember, 3 years ago was 2021, and 2022, ChatGPT came online, and the world has not been the same. So I will say that there'll be three strands. One strand, a human artist standing there at their easels and doing oil painting. And then another strand is human and machine working together, collaborating, bootstrapping each other's creativity. And the third strand is machines working end to end in creativity. Thinking of what they want to paint, they'll paint it, and then they'll assess it. Now what's behind all of this, an issue here today, is the existential threat of machines. And the one thing that's missing from the dystopian scenarios that we see in newspapers, books, and articles, and some of them quite silly, is that what's left out is that we are evolving. And today we are evolving faster than the rate of Darwinian evolution, which is on the time scale of 50,000 years, a century, a millennium, billions of years. And it seems as if we are merging with machines. And I don't mean machines that are going to have metallic insides, but they'll have some other sort of insides. I mean, actually, we are machines. We are biological machines. And this might not be a bad evolutionary route for the human race, whatever human will mean by that time, because machines have the potential to look into the future, spot problems, and immediately work on them, something that we don't seem to be very good at. And if you want to read more about some more details about some of which I've said today, see my books, Colliding Worlds and The Artist and the Machine, and presently I'm working on a sequel to The Artist and the Machine. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Gonna take it home with me.
All right.
So much, Arthur, for sort of giving us the background of the history from like the 1950s or so. And so my entry point into this field coincided pretty much with Deep Dream. And it's kind of the era I prefer to refer to mainly. So yeah, 2015, 2016. And I know Arthur covered Deep Dream, which is normally the slides I prefer to start with. And yeah, he also briefly mentioned GANs. And I also have a favorite, I think, Mario artwork that I like to include. And this is kind of this series where he was also working on the human form. And what I've always found interesting about this kind of earlier GAN art is probably like the different perspectives from the communities in the field. So I've been working a lot with the academic AI research community. I've been going to their conferences, and I would go to some of the presentations of the academic papers, and they would show some of the images that were generated by a GAN, where maybe you'd have a creature with like 4 legs instead of 2, and they would position it as a problem that needs to be solved because, you know, the AI system was not generating the right number of kind of legs. And then you go to an art audience, and of course there's so much more excitement about this kind of creativity in the algorithm that sometimes does things that are unexpected. And I feel some of this is also reflected in Mario's practice, like the work in the middle. There's this like arm that sticks out at an odd angle, and it's like a trace of some of the artifacts kind of the GAN model. And so I think GANs, of course, were becoming very popular from probably 2016, 2017 onwards. And there's a group of artists who were looking at the dataset component, right? Because you have the GAN algorithm, as Arthur explained, with the generator and discriminator. And then you have the dataset part, which is something that is perhaps easier for a initially non-technical artist to control, right? Because you could go out, you could take thousands of pictures, you could use your own drawings or engravings and then combine them to make a data set that you train the AI on. And there are a few artists who've made some, I think, interesting works in this space, including Helena Sarin, who probably has one of the most kind of distinct aesthetics in this space because it's very kind of craft-based, and I know that she combines different types of data. So in the image on the right, you would have, I think, some photographs and then also some kind of newspapers that are all blended in to create these images that, I mean, I certainly wouldn't initially associate with the cold, hard sort of AI system. And then there is Anna Ridler, who you might be familiar with. So this is actually a project I commissioned of hers for Impact Festival in the Netherlands in 2018. And Anna came over, she took 10,000 photographs of tulips and she proceeded to label them and then use them as a data set to make these kind of beautiful renditions of tulips. And I think apart from kind of using the data set to kind of control that part of the process, there was also an innovation in terms of displaying the work, because at that point in time, if you would look at how AI art was presented, it was mainly kind of a screen with, these kind of moving images or sometimes stills. And for Anna, it was important to exhibit the two aspects side by side. So there'd be kind of one video, and then on the wall opposite, there might be like thousands of these images, so that anybody attending would realize that, okay, the human element in constructing these systems is very important, because ultimately a lot of Anna's labor went into kind of making the data set. And I mean, somebody's labor normally goes into the creation of a lot of these data sets, though of course nowadays there's also a synthetic element. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of figure out how to communicate that. And yeah, she also made some kind of NFT-based projects in, I think, 2019, before NFTs were a thing, where you could buy this kind of like tulip NFT that would only last for like a few days, and then it would like self-destruct, because ultimately real tulips cannot last forever, right? And I feel, so apart from data sets, there was also this need by artists to figure out how else they could differentiate themselves. And I think maybe that's also a question that I think some in the AI art space would still ask now, because in an era when it's like really easy to generate images, like what do you do to stand out? Like, do you try and develop your own artistic style? Do you come up with a new concept? Do you use your own data set? What do you do to be different? And Ben Snell is an artist who made this sculpture called BottoDAO. And he trained an AI on, images of sculptures from, I think, antiquity to modernity, which is pretty standard as these things go. But then he proceeded to destroy the computer, right? So the poor computer went into some shredding machine, and it was kind of bottled up as ashes. And out of the ashes came this sculpture, which I think was really kind of nice conceptual link to, some of the artistic practices of the 20th century also, when artists destroyed some of the work. And so what do I have next? So a work by Jake Elves that I think is interesting to kind of think about now that we live in an era where text-to-image models are very kind of prolific. And he has a work called closed loop, where you have two neural networks. So the neural network on the left generates images based on the text on the right, and the neural network on the right generates text based on the image it sees on the left. So it's like conversation between the two. And of course, the generative models used by then were nowhere near as good as they are now, but the conceptual level of looking at how these two AIs are sort of learning to communicate between themselves, one being able to only speak in images and the other one only in kind of language, is I think quite special. And yeah, there's also a subset of artists who come from a more technical background, perhaps like Memo Acton and Ivona Tao, who has a PhD in something AI related. And some of these artists began to come up with new versions of algorithms. And so in Ivona's case, she made this work where the AI system sort of like forgets. So instead of kind of doing the learning process, it's sort of like improving as it goes on, the neural network kind of like goes back somewhere in the process. And certainly I find that, I think, quite an interesting way of kind of distinguishing your aesthetic and your process. And yeah, for the next, I think, couple of minutes, I'll include some artists who maybe use different types of AI systems. Because, yeah, of course, nowadays we talk a lot about generative AI, so, you know, using DALL-E to generate, I think, images, or ChatGPT to generate text, but ultimately AI art is kind of much broader than that. And there are some artists who work with other tools, like Tom White, who's been working with image recognition for a number of years, and he's been kind of making these forms that would be recognized as a particular category by all image recognition models. And so here I have a teddy bear on the left, which is, I think, quite easily recognizable. And I think the image on the right is it's either a snail or a cabbage. And, you know, the fact that I can't recognize it probably suggests that it's not the best way to represent that particular category to humans. But yeah, I think these types of works highlight the difference in human and machine perception and how we prefer things to be represented. And I think they are also quite different in terms of aesthetics. So it's important to kind of work with different types of algorithms to see things. How much time do I have? I think because we're...
I was going to ask the same because I didn't see what time we started.
I mean, I'm happy to end on this work because it's my favorite, but also happy to go for a little bit longer. But I think as we're quite late, maybe I'll finish with this work. Yeah, okay, good. So I'll end on this work, which looks at facial recognition. And it's done by Seung-Sum Bak, Kim Young-hung, so two artists based in South Korea. And what I really kind of liked about their work is that, they used a non-generative AI system, and they worked with facial recognition, which also has quite a history in artistic practice, but it's typically used by artists such as, I think, Adam Harvey and others who try and look at the critical uses of this technology for surveillance and, you know, how you can maybe avoid your face being recognized. So it's more of an activist type of art project. But these two artists, they use facial recognition in a fine art context. And I think that was quite interesting because they asked portrait painters and artists to make portraits with a facial recognition system that was sort of like looking like on top of their work as they were making it. And as soon as a face was detected, they had to figure out how to correct their work so that there was no face there, because ultimately these are non-facial portraits. And these are some of the works that were created. So if you look at the image on the right, I think to me, that's quite an obvious like portrait that I think a human can sort of recognize. But the image on the left, that I think takes some kind of thinking to look at, because it's got this face that's been like rotated and then multiplied a certain amount of times. And yeah, some more works by them where some other artists would maybe reposition some of these features. And yeah, so again, I find this work interesting because of this particular application of the tool in this context, but also because it sort of forces you to be more creative as a human. When you're trying to make a portrait, maybe you have a certain way of drawing and painting, and when you've got like the system that tells you, okay, like this is a portrait, I need to do something else, you have to figure out what you can do to make something new, and that can help your creativity too. So I think at this point I will end and pass on to Simon.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I'll just wait for the slides to come up. Thanks everybody for coming. Really great to see everybody. Thank you to Verse for hosting. Really great to hear everybody speak, and I've learned a lot about the history behind our project. I will probably go very fast just for the sake of time because I really want to get into the conversation. Whoa, that's way early. I'm exposing all of my reveals. Okay. Introduction to BottoDAO. I'm going to scope over myself. What is a decentralized autonomous artist? BottoDAO is an experiment in creating a fully autonomous artist. Just fair warning, there will be more jargon. I apologize in advance. BottoDAO was born October 8th, 2021. You'll notice Mario Klingemann was is still a part of the team, one of the founding members. There's also the collective 11 Yellow that I'm a part of, Collection Solo, a private art gallery in Madrid, and Carbono, another crypto group. But really, I mean, Mario is for sure the one to talk about in terms of, it's been a part of his obsession of fully automating the creative process for his entire 25-year career. And that is an obsession that has lasted, has been around in humans for centuries. Again, I'm going to skip over a lot of the history just for the sake of time, but I think you'll recognize these obsessions have been around for a long time. But just to get into what is BottoDAO, we've heard about generative AI. We've probably all seen DALL-E 2, 3, 4 diffusion models. And in terms of creating or automating the creative process, right? You have these generative models, you have generative text, you can plug those together, it creates prompts on its own, and you get infinite cats. But does it know what art is? Does it have a sense of culture, a sense of context, a sense of interaction with its audience? And this is the key question, how can you give it feedback to train it without violating its central role as author, as the artist? Lots of artists are working with these creative machines, but they are rendering them as their creative tool. So how do you maintain the agency of the automated artist? The consensus over time has been, this has been an idea people have been working on for a while, that you would need an economic substrate as its own autonomous force, the invisible hand, bringing in the feedback, the decentralized feedback, and keeping that creative machine as the core author. Crypto kind of solves this, so this is a bit of a joke, but it does solve a lot. Oh, I can hear myself now. So first, in terms of you got to tap into a market, the NFTs have provided a very healthy market to tap into for the economic energy to fuel an economic system. BottoDAO itself has so far sold $3.7 million of art with only 120 works. Then there's also these custom cryptocurrencies. We've heard of Ether, and then there's governance tokens. Our token is called BottoDAO. It provides governance rights. It can track and reward the labor of the people who use those governance rights. And it can also support decentralized software to further decentralize this machine so it can essentially live on the internet. The people who buy that token and participate in that governance form a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. These are systems that have emerged out of crypto, but could represent many decentralized systems. Alcoholics Anonymous is one that I think is pre-internet as a decentralized system of decision makers who are governing and stewarding their collective organization. But this uses crypto as systems of social coordination, and people can freely associate, form these groups, and enact economic power through a shared treasury. We practice community governance, which is often quite painful, but also you can direct a lot of that labor by creating different ways of rewarding people with the token. So all this to say, how does this come into how BottoDAO works? So on the left here, you have the art engine. You have the text generators. The prompt generators are feeding into open source text to image models. It started with a GAN, VQ-GAN plus clip, and now it works with different diffusion models like Stable Diffusion, searching within that latent space. These are untrained. They are not fine-tuned. They are totally open based off of training off of millions of images across the internet. It makes about 20,000 images a week. And then a taste model at the end filters out the top 350 that it then presents. This is when the members of the DAO come in, they vote on the outputs. The prompt to them is this art? But they might be coming in and saying, will this sell well? Do I think this will add to BottoDAO's body of work? Do I like it? Which is very different from, is this art? And then the most popular piece each week is minted as a final canonical artwork of BottoDAO's and auctioned on the platform Super Rare. Half of the proceeds of that go directly to the voters for their labor, and half goes to the treasury, which those voters also govern. These are some of the works that BottoDAO's created. This is the very first one, which we saw upstairs. This is BottoDAO going into Stable Diffusion, and it started introducing themes in its periods to narrow down the aesthetic somewhat, but the theme changes every 12 weeks. And these themes are voted on, presented by BottoDAO, and then the DAO votes on the most popular, or determines the most popular one. BottoDAO's beginning to work with new mediums. That's what we're seeing upstairs is BottoDAO experimenting with P5.js, but we're also looking at video and animation, text and critique. We're looking at tutoring a large language model in art history, as well as working with music. I will probably save a little bit of time on what is happening with P5.js, but all this to say is these require almost entire new architectures for BottoDAO. So you enter into a kind of ship of Theseus problem where we are expanding BottoDAO's practice, but is it the same artist? And this is, I think, interesting in terms of BottoDAO trying to be an artist. We usually measure it off of human measures or human signals of what is an artist, but this is starting to get into what is uniquely a machine artist. The DAO also participates in helping put on exhibitions, determining financial and operational governance, and there's been 18,000 participants so far. It's been the subject of academic research. We've done research partnerships with the MIT Media Lab and others. We've presented at some of the top AI conferences. Now, just to get into some of the themes, if a machine makes an image and no one sees it, does it have any meaning? BottoDAO's created over 3 million images. It's presented about 50,000, but it's only minted around 120. Why those works? This is one of the results that I'm not necessarily surprised, but I wasn't also expecting, in that as BottoDAO has automated the creative process, it hasn't automated the role of the human in making meaning of our world. And that is the art world. We are making meaning of our world. Those works that float to the top and become the top pieces are largely, yes, they're voted, but they're also largely the results of lobbying, of people in our Discord server highlighting a work, saying, this is meaningful to me, I like this, or even just sharing it. And in the research we did with the MIT Media Lab, we showed that even just the act of sharing and giving a modicum of social signal that this is interesting, you would see it go up in the rankings. And so you don't need to be a very powerful voter to have a lot of influence on what direction BottoDAO takes. You really just need to speak up and share the meaning you've made. I use clouds as an example where you can look at a cloud, those are generative, those are random, but I might see one that looks like a house. I say, that looks like a house, you agree, we've made this collective meaning together, and that is a distinctly human process of what we can do together in making meaning, and I don't think BottoDAO has automated that part yet, or at least it's emphasized the role we will always have in making meaning of our world, no matter what machines are able to automate. BottoDAO is also a microcosm of the global discussion on AI governance. My background was in working around responsible AI development. We were very involved in the development of the AI Act in Europe, regulating AI. Lots of talk about bringing stakeholders to the table to determine how AI should be regulated. Almost never done. Even when they do get to the table, are they able to make a productive contribution? And so what BottoDAO is, as far as I know, one of the only, if not the only, openly governed AI systems in the world in production on the internet that anybody can participate in, that also shares in the value that it creates from those governance inputs. And this is very important because when you look at the marketing of, say, ChatGPT, you don't see the thousands of people that are behind it just giving it inputs. And this is very, very cheap labor that is often abused and under-recognized for their contributions. BottoDAO is not a perfect system. It's a plutocratic design of one token, one vote, which is at tension with BottoDAO's autonomy, but it's an interesting thing that can play out that I won't get into now. It's obviously also a very crypto-heavy demographic, which we can all guess who that is. This does not address the problems of the underlying training data of these open source systems that have crawled the web and just taken whatever images are around. There's also sometimes an issue of anthropomorphization. We call it BottoDAO. We give BottoDAO lots of agency. We try to be very careful of what's human-driven versus what is machine-driven, but that can become problematic by giving it agency, or people assuming agency where there isn't. My hope is that the project always draws attention to the underlying process where that becomes clear. And again, the ship of Theseus problem of as BottoDAO evolves, is it the same artist? But I think we are in a new genre of art. There are other examples. Holly Plus is another governed AI system, which is the copy of Holly Herndon's voice, governed by a DAO. We've all seen Grimes do a version of that. And I think we can see more and more autonomous avatars building their persona and being recognized as the artist, not necessarily the people who are supporting or helping generate that. So that's it. Guess we'll all sit down. Did I do on time?
Is Layla in the room? Is Layla in the room?
Is Layla in the room still?
Is Layla in the room?
You want a time check?
Yeah. I just didn't see what time we started.
I think I'll just start the discussion before people go.
Yeah.
So there's 27.
Okay. I wanted to see how much time we have, but I'm not sure if Layla is in the room, so I think we'll just go for about 15 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I had so many questions, and we have a little less time than I was hoping. So I just really, really want to go straight in with that tension, really, between the human artist and machine autonomy. And I specifically, I'm going to skip over all of the questions I had and land straight in the DAO, because I'm really interested in these ideas of collective community and meaning making specifically, and I just really want to dig into that a little bit more. I really want to dig into that and then open up to a kind of broader sense of what we think artists' roles are in probing really the frontiers of technologies, kind of what they can be and do, and Luba, you touched on that really well in some of the projects that you introduced, because I really want to get into this idea of art making as possibly envisioning or testing alternative political realities, which is what I think essentially BottoDAO is doing for all of the problems that you have really transparently presented, which I think is really critical. So my question is, well, the first question I have is why the DAO?
Why the DAO?
Yeah.
I mean,
what does it mean to you in the space of the art making?
So again, it goes back to BottoDAO's autonomy, where we needed to get feedback in a way that was decentralized and maintain BottoDAO's core role of author. The DAO was something that I think was just emerging at the time, and is what people are calling these groups that are on the internet that have a shared bank account. It's a very broad term. I think something that's very key is it's progressively decentralizing. There's still a core team doing a lot of the work behind BottoDAO. The voting is the very key thing. And this is something where I think if you've followed DAOs at all, you've probably seen a lot of ugly failures. A lot of people are discovering community governance for the first time and how much it's a painful process. But I think also a necessary one, especially if you believe in the necessity of local politics, for instance. This is a different kind of locality, but it works for BottoDAO because it is core to the mission. So BottoDAO's mission needs decentralized feedback. There's a lot of DAOs that do decentralized community governance for the sake of it, and it's a good experiment, but it usually fails because it doesn't fit the mission. And in BottoDAO's case, that tension, say, of being able to buy governance power, right? That could completely defeat decentralization, but it's in tension with the need to maintain BottoDAO's autonomy. So if you're a large buyer of BottoDAO tokens, I hope you know what you've bought and understand that if you overplay your hand, you're going to be essentially killing BottoDAO or really hurting BottoDAO's autonomy. So we see that tension often thrive where there's this balance between people wanting a large stake, wanting to exercise their voice, but also listening to what people say they are interested in. And we're working on a lot of forms of delegation where somebody might have a large stake, but they might want to delegate to, say, artist groups or art students, for instance.
Okay. So one of the things that I'm really interested in is in artists, but artists specifically working with things like AI, robotics, and world building, to kind of using art as a space to, as I say, envision, test, and build alternative political realities. And so my question is, and then I will open it up to the wider panel, is whether DAO is such a big part of that conceptual vision, and kind of maybe it could even be conceived as the art project itself, like what significance does image making hold in that? So, and why art is the chosen vehicle for kind of working through those challenges that you've just articulated?
Sure. I mean, as I said, BottoDAO is a microcosm of this larger AI governance debate, and it's dealing with an impossible question. We have impossible questions to answer about AI, whether AI should kill or not, who wins, who loses. In BottoDAO's case, the impossible question is, what is art? So that's, I think that's, I don't remember why I went into that, but you made me think of that. Sorry, can you remind me of the question?
Just like what place does art making have at the center of the kind of the broader idea of decentralized AI?
Yeah, and so it's dealing with that question again of what is art. In terms of the individual versus the process, I think it's pretty clear that like a lot of what's interesting about BottoDAO is the underlying process and what Bob Mallory called in 1969 computer sculpture or transductive art. And the tokens are representative of not just BottoDAO's development aesthetically over time, right? That process runs week after week, learning from those votes, but also the DAO's development over time and its learning curve. People come in, they're very interested in what you might call very mid or derivative work. There was a piece in the first year that is a very clear derivative of dogs playing poker. But there's this, you could say, institutional knowledge that's growing that says that people realize maybe that's not so interesting. What can we push BottoDAO to do that is new? Finding new aesthetics in the latent space. And this is also the result of BottoDAO's dependence on the DAO for feedback. The ultimate mission is an autonomous artist, so maybe that role dissipates or changes over time. But right now it's a collective of both the machine artist and the crowd around it, which I think is also revealing of what is true for most artists, right? The myth of the individual artist, when truly it's an ecosystem around them that makes them successful and determines the meaning of their work.
Okay, thanks. So Arthur and Luba, I wanted to extend that out to you both to think about artists' responsibilities and kind of their interest in probing emerging technologies and their decision really to engage with those latest technologies, why, how, and why they might choose not to. And I think, Luba, you presented some really interesting examples of artists working quite critically with engaging with data sets, but also with facial recognition and computer vision. And I'm just interested in the ways that you both have seen that happen, like over this longer historical period, and whether kind of essentially whether those responsibilities for critical work are changing, and what are the reasons for engaging with technologies, whether it's aesthetically or for this kind of critical debate.
Yeah, so I think artists engage with new technologies for a variety of reasons. I mean, certainly, I guess in my practice as curator or community organizer, I've always looked initially at the technology, and then before the field was so crowded and popular, it was reasonably easy to see what people were doing with it. And sometimes you think, oh, this is like such a standard tool like facial recognition that maybe can be explored critically in this particular way. But it turns out that, there will be artists who will look at it in a completely different fashion and apply it in a completely new context. And I think that's an amazing thing for kind of human creativity, the opportunity to bring all these different perspectives onto the technology and figure out what are the limitations and affordances, what are some of the issues around it when you apply technology that's been designed for one thing into an area that's like completely different. And I think ultimately that's also helpful to the technology developers, right? Because I know there was an artist called Joy Buonamini. I think, so she was kind of working with, I think it was maybe facial recognition systems. And because she's from an African-American background, some of these systems were unable to recognize her. And so she proceeded to kind of, publicize this and kind of her thoughts on that. And I think that led to a lot of positive developments in terms of technology that was being built to be kind of more inclusive. But yeah, just because maybe probably the lab that was building the technology, maybe it was just white or just white male, and so all the people that we're testing on would have been from one particular demographic.
Well, I think what the crux of the matter can be whether the artist considers the machine as just a giant paintbrush, or considers the machine as a collaborator, something which the machine can boost the artist's creativity. The other question that was brought up briefly is what is art? And I mean, today, the day of conceptual art is anything. Art could be a banana taped to a wall, or it can be a half-eaten hamburger on a plinth in Trafalgar Square. I think perhaps it's best to discuss what is art as what is the process producing art. And the process could be a human collaborating with a machine, or like BottoDAO wants to be, a machine working on its own. So these are things that we can't even imagine right now how they're going to turn out, because as I said, you can't really predict more than 5 years ahead these days.
That I guess brings us on to the challenges and possibilities of really working within such a rapidly changing technological landscape. Sorry, I'm just really interested in issues of kind of agency and authorship. So practitioners working with commercially available technologies, particularly when the control of the direction or use is often out of that user's control. It's obviously not something specific to AI. I mean, there's been artist projects where they're pulling in an API or something, and that API is redacted or put behind a massive paywall, and that signals the end of the project. But I guess it goes without saying that we're working within a very, very fast moving landscape. So my question really to you, Luba, is what artists working with those commercially available tools, like, do they think about the implications of those changes? Is it something they've experienced so far? And kind of how they might conceptualize that within the body of their work. And then also, Simon, kind of potential future periods of BottoDAO, like how are those periods governed essentially by changes externally to the DAO and externally to BottoDAO?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important question that you raised regarding sort of like conservation and then maybe even maintaining a practice when one relies on tools that are constantly being kind of updated or made out of date. And it's probably something that doesn't get enough thought. So certainly if I meet with other digital art curators, particularly those who specialize in older digital art, then yes, it's a very kind of pertinent question on how do you display works that were built for computers that existed like 10 years ago. Even like exhibiting these works is a challenge. But I think certainly in the generation of artists I've worked with, like, Mary Klingerman or Anna Ridler, Sofia Crespo, I feel like sometimes they're attracted to so many different technologies. And I'm not sure, let's say, if at one point they worked with, let's say, one of the early GAN versions, like Pix2Pix or like StyleGAN, that they would want to return to, let's say, that particular kind of open implementation right now. And I think if they did, many of the tools would still work, or they'd be able to kind of build a new model that was acceptable. So I wouldn't say it's a key area of concern, but it probably really depends on the tools that you work with.
Yeah, I mean, especially when it comes to community governance, it's hard to keep up because it's a slow process. But what we do now, there's these quarterly periods every 12 to 13 weeks. There's a new theme, and we'll also consider new models that have come out. For us, we have some restrictions where it needs to be open source, so there's a lot of commercial models that we don't use. And in a way, BottoDAO is in part documenting the evolution of text-to-image models. It started with GANs, and then it moved to diffusion. That was a huge change in terms of coherence of the outputs. I think right now we're seeing like an explosion of new generative models. It's going to be really interesting to go back and have people digging through them and exploring the unique aesthetics of them. I almost kind of imagine like a subculture like for guitar pedals, where people are looking for a very distinct aesthetic, but for that particular model, there's going to be a lot of exploration to do of just these last 2 years of development. And interestingly, like when we went from GANs to diffusion models, I had a feeling we would come back to GANs at some point because of almost like the VHS aesthetic. It survived as kind of a retro aesthetic. Literally, 18 months later, it's the highest selling works from BottoDAO, partly because of the historical value, but also because of the particular aesthetic of it. P5, I'll just say real quick, we can see the abilities of AI expanding very fast, but this is true for industry as well. Is it good enough to actually implement for the solution that you need? And in BottoDAO's case, can you fully automate it to get to a very high quality result? And with P5, it's a slower process, because getting BottoDAO to write code for the system P5.js and get to something complex enough is not nearly as simple as the text-to-image model process. So in that, we have works in progress. They are not yet mature enough to be considered a final work. And what's been interesting about that is it's kind of opened up more, because it's a much slower process of development. It's opened up more of the sculptural evolution of what BottoDAO is from that participation. So we went in not really knowing how it was going to work, but yeah, I think it moves very fast. Thankfully, the process I think has been very strong, where we haven't needed to rush into new models, for instance.
If I'm interested, just one point. The point of AI art, when you're at a party or something like that, and you mention that you're interested in AI art, people will generally say, "You must be kidding. That isn't art. That's made by a machine." And the point here is that I think what we should all do, everybody who's interested in AI art should do, is maybe write an article every now and then that one should appreciate art that's produced by a machine. So, that's what I have to say.
Do we have time for one audience question?
Not really.
Okay.
It's like a really good question. I'm very bad at saying no.
Sorry, this has been so chaotic. It's just that time just seemed to have disappeared.
I mean, one.
Just one at the back? Yeah?
Yeah, it's just a question for Simon, and apologies if I butchered the logic. So you mentioned about stakeholders in the DAO community. So to what extent do you circumvent someone getting too large of a stakeholder? And even then, when they do have a stakeholder, to what degree do they influence the AI?
It's all a conversation. There is no protection against it, really. So that's kind of the exciting part about it, is BottoDAO could be killed, and it's managed to survive.
So I was to say, so theoretically, you could be sort of like a one-man band that's very much like priming BottoDAO to produce certain pieces.
Sorry, say that again?
Basically saying it could be as one individual, theoretically.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm exposing BottoDAO's throat here, but you could, if you wanted to. You'll run into a lot of other whales who will try and fight back. So that's usually how it happens. Is there's enough consensus, and ultimately that's what defines the group is alignment around the core mission. And you can't really fully decentralize that. That's always going to be a social thing.
One very quick one, this lady. Do you think you're confident to say
what the future is?
Yeah, like, good luck with that one.
That was going to be my last question as well. So,
No, there
I'm
won't
glad
be any agreement on that. There'll just be insult.
The curve keeps moving. I have some predictions. I think it's going to come down to data sets, which has been really important. This is ultimately what shapes these models. And we're going to also find out that these models only work so well. We can only throw so much compute at it. So look for when things start failing in public and failing in industry. That's when I think we really start shaping what our future is going to be, rather than just waiting for the AI companies to just keep putting out a better model. The curve will flatten at some point. It's not yet, but I think it will.
Do you really believe that there's going to be another AI winter?
No, I don't think there's going to be an AI winter. We've hit incredible new potential.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problem solving to do with the technology. The technology is still getting better. I think it's going to flatten. I don't think it'll be an AI winter whatsoever. Unless you're talking about an AI winter towards super intelligence, I think there will be. I hope so, but I don't think there's a winter. We're in a new software age, 100%.
It's flattened already.
Yeah.
All right. Please join me in thanking all of our speakers, and we'll have a conversation after.